Well, welcome one and all to this first live video from the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. These are interesting and difficult times we live in. Who knows how it's all going to end? We've got public health orders that are going to run for 90 days, so they tell me. But, I'll be surprised actually if it does run to only 90 days. I just hope everyone is staying safe. It's very, very important that we all work together and we get together to work to get through this together as families, as communities, as co-workers. It's very important that we try to stick with the rules. Social isolation is a very important thing in relation to what's going on here. It's the only way we're actually going to be able to control this in the longer run. It's very, very important that we try to work together. It's pretty obvious the government can't suppress this virus now. It's long gone. They missed the opportunity back in February when they should have been on the ball and they weren't. Now all the best they can do is try and control it, minimise it, and hopefully we don't end up with too many sick people in hospitals. And that's really down to us. We've got to make sure that doesn't happen. I'd also, of course, like to give my condolences to anyone watching or listening that have lost family members and loved ones during this time. It's going to be very, very hard. We'll be doing a broadcast like this live on Facebook every week. You won't be seeing my ugly mug all the time. We've got a number of different of our members in Parliament going to be doing these broadcasts, and it's important that if you're interested, send us some questions. You can send them via Messenger if you like, or you can send them any other way you like. We'll be able to deal with them. So I've got a few things to say here, so I'm just going to go through some of them before we get to Q&A. It's very important that we try to take a step through analysis of what's actually happening. For example, I think overnight we actually had our news of the very first COVID-19 fatality outside of the Sydney region, and that's in Orange, and that's a terrible thing to have happen. Really, really sorry to hear that. Now, of course, we all know, having spoken to Helen Dalton and, of course, Donato and Roy Butler, that they do have this disease in their communities as well. So social distancing, wash your hands, and, of course, try and avoid touching your face if you possibly can. They're the most important things we have. They're really the only control things we have besides locking ourselves in our houses and only going out a minimum amount of time. We're here. We're still functioning. SFF is meeting every workday, Monday through Friday. We have a 10:30 party room meeting on where we all hook up and we talk about the issues that are live and important. So if you've got anything you want to try to cover with us, and in the last week we've seen a number of those issues, whether it was to do with the firearms registry and attendances, whether it's the opening of gun shops, whether it's sorting fishing out, and now, of course, the big conversation is around hunting. And I've only just probably 10 minutes been told that the police are quite happy if people want to go hunting. They don't have an issue with that. There are issues around travel. We're trying to sort that out. But if you live regionally and you want to go hunting, provided you stick with the social distancing rules, they're more than happy for you to go out and hunt and fish and collect your own meat for the table. It's a very important exclusion because it relates, of course, to the need, the ability to exercise and keep mentally fit as well. We're available. We're only as far away as the phone, so please, by all means, give us a call when you're ready, and we'll try to deal with some issues. There's just so many nooks and crannies and interpretations going on with the way these health orders have been dealt with. I don't think the government knows half the time what it's trying to do or trying to deal with. There's been a lot of stuff happening. It's literally changing every day. The government has released restrictions. The restrictions, of course, are unclear and contradictory. And we're, of course, in constant communication with the government, although they haven't made life easy for us to be able to deal with them either. They're not particularly communicative. We tend to, unless we go behind the scenes and try and talk directly, they tend to deal with. We're tending to deal with the the bureaucrats, because you can't get near the ministers. They're all too busy trying to sort out what's going on. It's important that we keep businesses open. Business is the lifeblood of this economy, especially small businesses. If they can keep going, we want to see that happen. We've seen the federal government, of course, put a lot of support in. We've seen the state government also putting a lot of support in. And anything we can, of course, do, we will possibly do. That's why in the hunting space, the fishing space, in the greyhound racing space, we've been keen to make sure that people get an opportunity to try to run their lives as normal as you possibly can. But the reality, of course, is, as I said earlier, we don't know how long this is going to last for. It just isn't going to be something that's going to happen. Our lives are going to be permanently changed. And in the longer term, hopefully we'll see perhaps a bit of an adjustment to our way of life and the way we do business in the future. I hope it's a good adjustment. All we've got to do is just see where we go and see what happens. Overnight, of course, we saw the government has given police some pretty heavy powers to try to control us. And I think in the end of the day, I've been quite vocal on that in the last 24 hours on Facebook. I'm very keen to make sure that the police do the right thing. There has been a bit of overstepping of the mark in my view, but I think a lot of that gets down to not a proper understanding of how this should or could be done. The police are trying to deal with it in a fair fashion. It's pretty obvious to see that the government is letting the police now lead this whole process, this fight against the COVID-19 infection, because you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that New South Wales Health have dropped the ball. They haven't been a good lead agency on this. I think the police, on balance, will end up being a better agency, but they have to be able to cop a bit of criticism. They have to be able to cop a bit of input. That's the way I see it anyway. What else is there? Yeah, I mean, that's really where I'm going. We need to make sure that our civil liberties are being looked after as well. And they have to be protected. And that's one of the key things that we'll be doing in the next 90 days, in the next 6 months, trying to make sure that wherever possible, we come out of this thing without our civil liberties being destroyed permanently. At the moment, people are prepared to cop a limitation on their ability to associate, but there's no way people are going to cop any limitation on their freedom of speech. So freedom of association, that's being severely curtailed, and we understand the reasons for that. But don't feel imposed upon. Don't feel shy when it comes to saying what you think. If you don't think what's going on around you is right, make sure you come and tell us. Talk to the police, talk to the government, talk whoever you want to like, because these are difficult times. The government has unique laws, and those laws make them king for a day. In fact, in Parliament a couple of weeks ago, when these laws went through, after we made some amendments to them, they were referred to as Henry VIII laws. In other words, it's just done by decree. So you see these public health orders being signed by the Minister for Health as a decree, and that's really it. So you don't have to take it just laying down. If you're unhappy about something, voice up, voice up, voice up. That's really what it's all about. My colleagues and I have been pressing the New South Wales Health Minister, Brad Hazzard, to proactively provide additional support to Western New South Wales. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that we haven't seen anything like the level of support in health in Western New South Wales. And now that we're starting to see, unfortunately, people dying in Western New South Wales, we really have to keep the pressure on, and we are. Keep the pressure on the government and Brad Hazzard, the Health Minister, to make sure that they are prepared, because in the reality, Western New South Wales is the least prepared for this virus pandemic. It's leaking in there, and we've got to make sure that rural hospitals and healthcare facilities are properly taken care of and thought of just as much as the emergency services and hospitals in Sydney. It's very important we do that. What came out of our party room discussion this morning was that rural hospitals in New South Wales need many, many thousands more testing kits. They need to get the testing ratios up. And of the three seats that we hold in the bush, the one that's got the worst infection rate, I think it's about 34 confirmed, is the seat of Murray, where Helen is the representative. The electorate of Barwon has a handful of nurses at their disposal only, and while these nurses provide exceptional service to their community in ordinary circumstances, these are not ordinary circumstances. These are extraordinary times, and they need additional support to help prepare for this risk. The Royal Flying Doctor Service provides medical support to some of these services and retrieval of critical patients, and that's happening on a day-to-day basis as far as we understand. The Royal Flying Doctor Service has expressed publicly their concerns about people in rural and regional towns and the limited resources they have to support remote medical services during the COVID-19 pandemic. Medical services in most communities in Western New South Wales, and especially Barwon, are not designed to take care of patients who need ventilators. We need more ventilators. That's pretty obvious. This could result in a high number of fatalities in the end, and I certainly hope that it doesn't end up that way. I've got a number of questions that are starting to come through to me, and I might just move through them and try to answer them as best as I can. A question here from Pedro Watto. Thanks, Pedro. Can we go camping on private property or fishing and hunting? Well, from my understanding, and I got a message about 10 minutes ago from the Police Minister's office, you can go camping and fishing on and hunting on private land. I don't think there's an issue with that. But again, as I said earlier, the social distancing issues are important, especially with strangers. The issue that seems to stick out in all of this, and we're still not satisfied that we know the answer, is that if you've got to travel long distances into rural and regional New South Wales, they don't really want you to do that. If you're a local and you want to go hunting or fishing, I don't think there's a big deal with it at all. You can go and do it. We saw yesterday the government backflip on fishing, which was a good thing to see. I mean, if you can go and play golf with appropriate social distancing rules, well, then why can't you go fishing? Especially if you're got the opportunity to go out and get a feed for your family as well. That's double the reason why. And really, the same logic applies to hunting. There's no question of that. Chris Achilles, why has Sunwater locked us out, same as Seekwater, for taking our feed home from the dams? It's still harvesting food, our fishing, only fishing by ourselves. Well, I don't really know the answer to that. I think that looks like a Queensland question, and the reality is most of these rules I'm talking about here are in New South Wales. I think Queensland has taken a lot more restrictive approach to things. For example, we've seen Queensland shut down gun shops. We've seen Queensland also do some other rather restrictive things. We've seen Victoria shut gun shops down. But what we haven't done is we haven't seen that sort of stuff happening in New South Wales. In fact, in New South Wales, state forests are still open for hunting. We've also seen gun shops still open for trade, because the reality is shutting them down, as we saw in Queensland, was an exercise in politics being run by the left wing of the Labor Party, and I found it disgusting. So, Chris, I can't really answer your question. The logic should be that they should be open. I agree with you, but they're not. They're just not. And you at least, I think, to some degree, have access to dams. We in New South Wales don't get access to most of those water catchments. Andrew Wilkinson, what will the government be doing to punish the Chinese government for allowing this virus to spread across the globe, destroying lives and the world economy? Well, that's a good question. I would suspect probably very little. China is, or was, and will probably end up being still our biggest trading partner. It's going to be very, very difficult for us to sanction them at all in any real way, and I just don't see them doing much about it. I'm sure they'll be talking to them. That goes without saying. But you've got to understand, with China, you're dealing with a communist dictatorship. They do what they want, when they want. They treat people like dirt if they think they need to. They don't believe in, obviously, any civil liberties or any freedoms at all. No freedom to think, no freedom to speak, etc., etc. So the reality is, I don't see a lot happening after this virus. We get past this difficult period that the Australian government could possibly really do. Cam Croak, what happens if hunting is banned in this pandemic, and when all firearm owners whose licences are due to be renewed in the next 6 to 12 months can't renew their licences because A, all ranges are closed, and B, you can't hunt because they've banned due to COVID-19, as our only genuine reasons for owning a firearm become irrelevant. Well, I think, Cam, I just don't see that happening. I wrote to the Firearms Registry last week about this very thing. I had a conversation with them on the phone. They were still contemplating their navel when I wrote to them again on Monday. I have not had an answer, but the general feeling is that to make those fixes, they'd have to actually change the law. And I think whether if it's regulations, they could put a regulation to fix it. If they were going to do more, I'd have to actually then go and deal with it in a different fashion. But I don't see that happening. We know hunting is available if you want to go and do it. I think these are emergency times and everyone's looking at everything in a special way. I don't see the Firearms Registry, certainly in New South Wales, doing anything that's going to be against the interests of shooters in this state. I just don't see it happening. It's not practical. I don't see them wanting to cause any sort of mischief at all. And I think in reality, they're having troubles dealing with what's going on as well. In fact, our Firearms Registry and our police have not done what Western Australia started, what Queensland have done, and also the lefties in Victoria have done, and that is effectively shut everything down. The shutting of ranges, for example, here in New South Wales was really on the basis, I believe, of sporting facilities, and the organisations themselves made those decisions. Pistol clubs, rifle ranges, etc. I think if this goes on much longer, I think we should be then thinking about talking to the government about getting those places reopened to shooting, so that we can make sure that with proper social distancing, people can actually start shooting again on ranges. James Kalmusik: can I leave my house to go hunting in a state forest? Said forest is 15 minutes drive from my house. The answer is yes. There's no question of that. But make sure you go and book in first. I don't want you getting in trouble with the DPI licensing unit. Go there, shoot some meat, and bring it home and feed the family, and have some damn good exercise while you're at it as well. John Cummins: can you please tell me why the Firearms Registry is 6 months behind? I haven't got enough time to go through all of that here right now. They told me in budget estimates, when was it now? It seems like a lifetime ago, about 2.5 months ago, that they were all caught up. Now, from what you're saying, and I'm certainly getting a lot of anecdotal evidence coming through from other shooters, is that they're not caught up. That's the reality of it. The reason why they did fall behind was, and I think this goes back a year and a half, maybe nearly 2 years ago, was that they had in my view, again, you never get a straight answer out of them, but in my view, it really got down to a failure to implement new computer systems, and those attempts caused a lot of uproar. They then sought, I think, probably Treasury force police to get rid of some staff that they shouldn't have got rid of, and after all of that, what we saw was that the place became a real muddle. I've been up there once, and the biggest problem with the registry is that putting aside some of the inexperienced staff you meet up there, is that the whole thing is just a massive paper war, and it's very, very hard for anyone to deal with the requirements of nearly 250,000 shooters and their firearms and all the transfers with what are basically 1970s systems, and that's really what it gets down to. And I think the Commissioner is doing his best, but I don't actually subscribe to exactly what he said in estimates. I think they've got a long way to go and a lot more to do, but he seems obviously very, very focused on getting it done. I think he's got some good people there. I think they will get it done. We're certainly the quicker the better as far as I'm concerned. Brett Inch: with the possible prolonged closure of shooting ranges, what will happen with the requirement to attend a certain number of shoots per year? Well, as I've just said a little bit earlier, my view is that won't be a problem, that will be waived. I'll preempt it. I'll say that will be waived. There's no way they're going to punish people for not being able to comply with the law when they themselves, through public orders, shut the ability for compliance down. And the same also goes with hunting. I mean, I want to go hunting. I can't do it. I want to have a club meeting, for example. For a cat AB genuine reason of hunting and vermin control. You can't have a club meeting. We have 6 or 7 club meetings scheduled every year. We've got one scheduled in May that's been cancelled, and I can't see us doing another one in the near future. So I'd say all of that eventually will be waived, but they're just going to have to work out how they can do it. We are, as I said, there is a request that went to the Commissioner's office and to the FAR. I'm still waiting, but I'm not holding my breath. Andrew Wilkerson, when is Gladys going to be held responsible for Ruby Princess being allowed to unload infected patients into the New South Wales public on her watch? Now, that's a very, very good question, and a prescient question, Andrew. Thank you very much for that. I was criticised earlier in the week for participating with Labor and the Greens in setting up and trying to set up an inquiry into the management of this whole process, the COVID-19. Part of that would have been questioning the health department about what they did and why they didn't do what they did. I know that sounds a little silly, but in the end of the day, from my reading, the Ruby Princess fiasco was brought about by an unprepared New South Wales Health. It wasn't a federal issue around border force, as far as I understand it. The people that had the sign off on all of this were the New South Wales Health, and they, if you notice now, are not taking the lead on the press conferences or any of those things. When will Gladys be held responsible? Well, that's going to be a lot harder now, because we were to have our first meeting, albeit an online meeting, tomorrow, but we had to vacate that date, and we've pushed it back to the middle of May because the Labor Party got cold feet. So hopefully when we get to May, in the middle of May, we'll have another meeting and we'll decide what's actually going to happen. Because I think by and large, after a bad start, the government is doing the best they possibly can do at this stage. But the rabbit's out of the hole; it's gone. They're not going to suppress this anymore. All they're trying to do is control the spread and keep the number of people down. In other words, you hear the expression all the time: flatten the curve. That's what they're trying to do. Excuse me. Robert Quadling, is Helen Dalton is making a political representation on behalf of Murray electorate currently with regard to the current pandemic? I think the answer to that is yes, Robert, that is happening. I was talking to her about it this morning. Debbie Buller, do you know what is going to happen to the debate and motion re the water register and a royal commission into water management in the Murray-Darling Basin? Yes, I do. At this stage, of course, nothing is happening. Parliament in New South Wales has been suspended until, I think it's the 15th of September, about 6 months, not unlike what's happened with the federal Parliament. And obviously, while Parliament is while Parliament is suspended in adjournment, then obviously no bills get debated, nothing gets put up. It's even very hard for us in the upper house to have conduct any sort of inquiry from our standing committee processes. It's very difficult. As far as on a day-to-day basis, I believe the bill's about to come again when we finally do get to Parliament. But what happens then, I don't really know. We have to wait and see. It will be a very interesting space to watch when that bill comes on for the rest of its second read. I'd be very keen to see how the National Party vote on those two particular items. It will tell us a lot about what we already know about the Nationals. Sal. Oh, how are you, Sal? Good to see you. Hi, Robert. Keep up the good work, mate. From the Stop the Lockout crew. Thank you very much, Sal. We do our best, mate. We do our best. It's important to see you guys can go fishing. I just wish it was just as easy for me to go hunting. I've had all my hunting trips already cancelled. I was supposed to be away last weekend. I was supposed to be away this weekend. I'm heading towards Easter for the rut. Of course, that's all finished. They don't want us city slickers turning up and giving them COVID-19. How terrible. I don't blame them, of course. Not that I've got it. In fact, today I went in and had my my flu shot. Yeah, I'm a bit sore and sorry at the moment, but anyway, I'll be okay. Lee Clark, if we can still hunt in a state forest as stated, where's the line drawn for unnecessary travel? E.g., can I drive 4 hours for a hunt? Now you're asking me to pick the proverbial flies out of the horse shit. Look, that's what I've been trying to get an answer to, and I thought I would have an answer today to that, because all the input I've been getting is saying, yeah, it's fine to go hunting, but I say, well, how far can you travel for that? And oh, well, no unnecessary travel. But hang on, this is travel for exercise purposes. We've had the National Party saying they don't want people from Sydney going to the bush, stay away because of infection. That was the general message earlier in the week. We haven't heard that again. I have actually heard that being voiced by some others. Look, the answer is I just don't know. How far can I drive 4 hours for a hunt? I just don't know. I'm not going to tell you can. I'm not going to tell you can't. I've got to say, do your own investigations. Have a look at the health orders. They're on the government website, and make your own interpretation. We're going to continue to try to get an answer out of the Minister for Police, and as soon as we do, we'll let everybody know. There's no question of that. Okay. There's another one here. Kai Wolfgangson. Why is the SSAA so quiet? Shouldn't they be more vocal on our rights? Well, look, I've seen some stuff the SSAA has been putting out, and I think it's basically been pretty good. They look, if they wanted to voice up on our rights, I think that's fantastic, but I wouldn't criticise them for not doing it. I think they've got their hands full trying to deal with what they're trying to deal with. I saw some good stuff come out of New South Wales executive, I think, this morning or yesterday. I've seen some Sydney branch stuff too. Look, there are difficult times. They don't want to take a political position. I can understand that. That's our job. We'll do that. But, politics is politics, and SSAA is an excellent sporting organisation that represents its Melbourne members. To tell you the truth, I'd rather we do all the voicing out on rights and issues in relation to that. But always remember that we need support from SSAA members when the time comes. And the time is when we have an election, we need as many SSAA members to put their hand up and come and stand on booze and hand out for us, because that's where the rubber hits the road. When we get to an election, that's when we need as many supporters out there supporting us as we possibly can get. It's very important that we do that. It's very important that we get a maximum turnout of members. I mean, you've got, what is it in New South Wales? Over 50,000 members? If we could just get 25% of those people turning out and helping us, it would make a huge, huge difference, especially at the next state election, where we've got a good chance to try and take a couple more seats off the National Party, which is really what it's all about. One of the key reasons, and I'll just mention it, we're heading towards a close now, but in my view, one of the key reasons that they didn't seek to automatically just shut down dealerships in New South Wales is that the bottom line is that they know they'll upset a lot of shooters. And the same with fishing. They'll upset a lot of fishers if they said, no, get lost, you can't go fishing. And I suppose you could say the same with golfers. Golf, if they observe the correct social distancing rules, is a good sport. It's good for exercise, etc., etc., etc. So what's the difference between shooting, fishing and golf? In the end, as far as all that's concerned, very little. Andrew Grintel. Hi, Robert. I may have missed it already. What is the ruling on boats still not allowed? I haven't been watching the news. Oh, okay. Watch the news, Andy. Look, I think boats for fishing is fine. If you're just going to go and burn up and down the harbour in your boat and not do any fishing, I think the answer to that is no. That's my understanding of it. Pleasure cruises, no. If you're going to go fishing and just happen to have a bit of pleasure in that, of course, while you're doing a bit of passive exercise with your fishing rod and hopefully catching a feed, I don't think there's an issue with that. But if suddenly lots and lots of people turned up on the waters in and around Sydney burning their boats up and down, I don't think that's really what the government wants to see happen. And I'd have to sympathise with the police if they said, look, come on, that's not really what this is all about. Don't stretch it too far, guys. Any more questions? Okay. Anyway, we've got, I think I've run to about the end of my questions. So thank you all very much for putting up with me for half an hour. I don't know really where that time's gone. Stay safe. Practice social distancing. Keep washing your hands. Keep it going all the time. And More questions coming in. Do I want to answer them? Well, I'm happy to keep going if you guys want me to keep going a bit longer. All right, shoot me some questions. I've got them coming in here. Actually, there's a bit there. The question is whether my answers are ever any good to you at all, or whether I can actually answer them. Robert, can you recommend one hunting club in Sydney? Which would it be? I'd have to recommend my hunting club, Australian Hunters International. There's an unpaid ad from me. In fact, I almost put my hunting club shirt on, but then again, I thought the better of it. This is a shooters, fishers, and farmers party venue, and that's what we're doing. There's another question here. What about motorbike riders? Why can't I ride my bike? Well, that's a good question. Why can't you ride your bike? I don't know. If I can drive a car, why can't you ride a bike? Especially if you're coming and going to work, if you're coming and going to the shops, or you're coming and going to a chemist or something like that. I don't know of any reason why you can't ride a motorbike. I've read the health orders right through when they came out the other day on the 30th, and I don't recall anything in there about not being able to ride a motorbike. I don't see that that's the case, certainly not in New South Wales. Stephen Crow. Robert, my local fishing grounds are closed. I can't fish Bondi Beach or Ben Buckler. Without copping a $1,000 fine. Is there any options for me as a local to pop down? This thing's jumping all over the place. To pop down to cast some lures under local council rules, closing and area. Are there any options for me as a local to pop down to cast some lures under local council rules, closing? I think I don't quite understand the question, but if you're saying can you go and fish in areas in your local council area that are closed, I think the answer is it's closed and you shouldn't do it. I wouldn't take that risk. Just because they're letting you fish doesn't mean that you can go and break other normal restrictions when it comes to fishing. I wouldn't recommend that you do that. Chrissy, can you see any reason why two mothers with a pram can't take their babies out for a walk together? Now, that's a good question, because that goes to what we saw happen the other day, and that was a lady with a couple of her children, I think, and a baby in a pram were exercising. She took a rest on a park bench and started to breastfeed the baby, and then was asked to move on by a police officer. Now, to my way of thinking, and certainly all the feedback I'm getting is that that was plainly wrong, that was plainly bad, and the police should have probably thought about that a little bit more before they actually did it. It's not the right thing to do. They shouldn't have been handling it in that fashion. So the answer is no, I don't see any problem with that, as long as they observe the social distancing rules, and by all means sit down on a bench, have a rest. That's called passive exercise. Passive exercise. That's the ruling that came from the police minister's general counsel, who told them that fishing was a passive exercise. So you can do it. You don't only have to be moving to have exercise. You can actually passively exercise. So please, by all means, take the babies out and have a nice walk in the sun. And when you come home, do it safely, carefully, and properly. Steve Robinson. Rob, what is one of the most important things you would want for hunters and fishers at the moment? You mean shooters, fishers, and farmers at the moment? The most important thing I want at the moment is, as far as people are concerned, I want you all to be safe and healthy. That's number one. But number two, as far as our party's concerned, I'd like to get more support for our party when the time comes. And we need more branches. We need more, as I said earlier, people, hunters, shooters, fishers, greyhound racing people. I've been pretty vocal on that on my social media in the last few days. Those people who should be out there helping us when we really need it. But that's really what I'm looking for. I mean, I've had the government say to me in years past, well, trying to buy our support after the last election. Well, what do you want? What do you want? Well, I'm not in the business of trading off things. I'm in the business of trying to grow the influence, the strength, if you like, of the party, so that I can make sure that we look after the people who look after us by voting for us. And in that, I'm talking about shooters, yeah, fishers, yeah, but those people, especially in Western and rural and regional areas of New South Wales, have been neglected for too long. So what I would like to see is the bias for the bush that our party expresses being shown for everybody in the bush. And the only way that's really going to happen, in my view, is if that we encourage people to vote Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party at every possible opportunity. Occasionally put your hands in your pocket for some donations. Now, I know that's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, in these difficult times. We're going to see record unemployment for a long time. We've seen the best part of $300 billion worth of government injection of cash into the system. It's unprecedented. We've actually got a coalition government acting more like a Labor government would do. Anyway, that's it. I'm being wound up here. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks. Tune in again next week. I'm not sure whether I'm going to be on again. Someone else might be. But thank you all very much for your support. Thanks very much for your interest. And Arrivederci.